two major, I think, issues with the book personally. One was that it seemed like steroids took a back seat to all the addiction issues. It seemed like it focused on the steroid use. I don't love the book very much. And two, there was a lot of minutia. I mean, you might talk about it at that, and you found out what the person in the front row was wearing, and I mean, they just on every little play was this person that had nothing really to do with it. It was to fill pages, it seemed like.
For me, it was kind of a gut-wrenching story. He was younger than me, but just reading about his growing up and kind of relating to guys that I didn't play varsity ball in high school, but I knew some guys that I would consider kind of superstars and guys that went on to play like low minors. And I knew the pressure that they were feeling from their dads about working out and trying to get to the next level and so forth. So I could relate to some of that pressure. I was certainly taken aback when you get this subtle little message about sexual abuse. I can't believe we waited half a book to even introduce that. It was kind of buried in there.
Yeah.
And it explains a lot, if you know anybody that's gone through addiction, the kind of stuff that people deal with mentally. So he had those two ramps. I think that, like a lot of guys that get into trouble, he had a lot of bad friends that were just enablers. And, Mike, when you talk about, not giving up, I think his biggest problem in my mind was the people that he surrounded himself with. And he wouldn't take the advice of saying, you got to get these people out of your life. The last thing to me that really kind of stunned me about the whole story was how distant his wife seemed to be. I thought she was such an important force in his life that when they were together, he was clean. And the fact that she insisted on staying in Houston, and I understand the logistics of moving your family around and not wanting to move to San Diego, but I think his life would have turned out significantly differently if she had been in San Diego when he was there.
Or even been there more. I mean, at least visited more.
Yeah, because he listened to her.
Yeah.
And I think his life would have turned out differently if she had been closer for longer, more consistently. So I found that to be kind of sad. So, when you talk about hate him or feel sorry for him or whatever, man, I think that's the thing that just got me was just how different things could have been with just a little bit of difference in behavior from both him and the family around him.
There are pieces missing in this book, like they throw the abuse thing out. Don't explain it, don't get any details, just a paragraph on. And the wife, it seems to me that maybe she didn't want to give an interview, she didn't want to talk to him, but she never does explain clearly why. There must have been some other underlying issue. Maybe she was up to here with it and just didn't want it. It was an excuse, to separate. So, but they don't get into a lot of the details of why certain tragic events took place. And he probably needed, I don't know if he needed to do more research or he just didn't have the answers, but he sort of dropped them in like names and All
right.
My sense is that he started writing the book thinking he was going to have some cooperation from certain family members that he never got. And so he filled in, make a biography with the minutia that Rick's talking about there. In other words, there's an enormous amount of detail about every game and play that really shouldn't, I think it would have been a better book if he didn't have all that. It bogged it down. And you read the book thinking you're going to get to the steroid issues and all that, and it just wasn't there in the sexual abuse. And that's because he had the older brother, I think, talked to him, but I don't think he ever had any serious interviews with the family members like the wife or the two daughters or the dad and the mom. Somebody in there dropped that in there, but what was he going to do with it? Because he already had a contract and was writing the book, thinking he was going to get to this, and it disappointed me in that now I feel I need to read one of these books like Game of Shadows or something to really get into it. Maybe you guys can compare those books with this book as far as the drug issue, but it turned out to be more just a biography to me than it did a book about PED use and the importance of this guy in the whole scheme of things and the whole issue.
And as the person who kind of was the one that recommended it out to the group, I felt that same disappointment partly because of the title. I thought that the fact the big confession through Sports Illustrated was going to lead into like the ramifications of who else, owned up to it. How did that impact, Major League Baseball's stance on it? I expected it to be more about the steroid policies and that, and instead you got a little bit of it, and it might have been the access issues, like Good couldn't find anybody to talk to him about that. But it's why it ended up being more of a book about Caminiti rather than about steroids.
It would have been a much different book, like if Caminiti had been alive or enough to tell his own story. That would made for a much better book. I felt like I was reading some kind of Game of Shadows knockoff that been over backward to be nice to Caminiti, and didn't get the real story. I mean, it was a good book. I liked it, but I'm like, where's the beef in this? It just wasn't much there.
Yeah.
Well, the title interested me also again because it doesn't seem to have much to do with the book.
Right. And I got curious about this. So I went to the Columbus Library's online catalog, looking for books about something that changed something else forever. There were 108 of them. So it's like you wrote the book and somebody said, "Oh, the other 107 did it. Why don't you do it as well?" And so they come up with that title.
Yeah.
I was just because of my lack of knowledge of the whole steroid situation, I guess. I was surprised, I guess, when I discovered reading the book that it was Caminiti who really blew the story. Sports Illustrated interview. I mean, I guess I've been primed by Ken Burns, who I remember covering the guy who saw the Andro in Mark McGuire's locker. He made it sound like he was the guy that really broke the story, but this book sort of made it sound like Caminiti was really the one who kind of broke it open. And I had never heard Caminiti's story before.
I got the idea Caminiti would do it again. If he had his druthers, he would use steroids again, become the star that he was, make the money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a direct quote from him that they say, "Would you do it again?" He goes, "Taking steroids was not one of my big mistakes." And I think he alluded to some friends, but those friends he never could part with. And I thought it was incredibly sad that so he came to his demise basically in a dealer's apartment, with no family, just and I think it said with $3 in his wallet or something, that he had just spent it all on more heroin or whatever he was taking at the time.
I meant to bring my Caminiti cards. I have a rookie Caminiti card, and I had one break about 2000, around 2000 thing. But he's one of those again. His arm went from this to this. His legs went from this to this.
Yeah.
I mean, he was sort of like he's like a Bonds. I mean, just totally different human being. You didn't recognize him the same human being. And so he's one of those probably truly did benefit from the steroids.
This Netflix thing, talking about Bonds, how he gained 20 pounds over one winter. And this guy, the guy from Walker, said he wasn't taking a thing, and that he just changed his nutrition and his workouts.
Yeah.
Well, Bonds had that big ego that, I mean, he really was envious of the press that home run race got. He wanted to be part of that.
That's what the show.
Yeah. I mean, the Shadows book, I mean, if you didn't already hate Bonds, I mean, his treatment of other people is unbelievably poor.
Well, wait, to put it in perspective, after college, I moved to San Francisco, so I spent the last, up until 3 years ago when I moved here, spent the last 35 years in San Francisco, with season tickets to the Giants being a Dodger fan.
You
Deal with that.
didn't wear that shirt to get you rich.
Oh, I wore my shirt.
You didn't tell about it.
But we had really good seats, so we were kind of protected.
Oh, yeah.
But my best friend, she was a lifelong Giants fan, so we went together. She took more of the abuse for being with the Dodger fan. But anyway, most of those Giant fans loved what Bonds did, but hated Bonds. Even the diehard Giants fans did not like him.
I mean, I felt like that when he was in Pittsburgh. I mean, I wanted the Pirates to win, and I wanted Bonds to take a collar, but I still wanted to win.
He won me a couple fantasy leagues, so I don't know.
Yes, Padres,
Right?
move in.
And he told him to move in, and Bonds gave him the one finger salute. And it was that shot that was short that he would have actually played up on and maybe even caught it, but yet Sabrine scored the
Yeah.
winning run.
Hard to
Yeah.
believe he's Willie Mays' godson.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think Willie had much of an influence on him.
He was.
That's the thing about Bonds. He didn't need to do that.
He didn't.
Right. That's the whole thing. He just didn't.
Now, 'cause I remember
When you talk about it, he
watching.
don't do that.
Well, no, go back to this because I didn't realize he behaved so badly even in the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, he was such a me only guy, and I mean, he was one of those guys that like if he misplayed a ball, I mean, you could see him up there. If there was an E put up there, he'd be in the outfield shaking his head, which the optics of that is really bad. And those are the kinds of things. And just it did. I always felt like he did. He or Jeff King. It's like really we lost the playoffs because Jeff King didn't hit. It's like he's a good player, but we weren't really expecting him to hit. You with your 1 for 24, we expected you to hit.
He was great on my fantasy team.
But I mean, and he goes down, and I mean, at some point he's liable to get in, and there's going to be a comment about how he won Mark Miller's fantasy league for him.
Probably having dinner with him tonight.
Yeah, but I think his time with the Giants for me just cemented my dislike for him because I mean I had such respect for Dusty Baker, yet Dusty permitted his Balco friends to be in the locker room, for him to have his chaise lounge chair behind a curtain. I mean, just like almost like a separate locker room.
He was bigger than the team, Blake. He was
What's that?
He was much bigger than the Giants were at the time.
That's right.
And honestly, that's what separates Caminiti from the Bonds and McGuire thing is because when Steve Wilson found the Andro and Mark's locker, Mark was like, "What the heck are you doing?" And Caminiti was like, "Yeah, I did this, and this is what it does to my body." It kind of reminded me of Mickey Mantle at the end of his life saying, "Don't be like me, don't wreck your body."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that was the main takeaway from the book for me, just how graphic it was in depicting that breakdown of how it affected him.
I do know, and I can't remember the name of the player. It might have been Palmero. It might have been A-Rod, but somebody of high statute said they did admit to using steroids, and they said their reasoning, which at least I could understand it, was that it does get your body back to healthy coming back from an injury. You'll heal faster. And from his perspective, and it might have been A-Rod, said, I was making so much money that I felt the pressure to
Was
get
A-Rod.
back. Was it okay? I need to be back on the field sooner because they're paying me too much money for me to heal slowly. And so at least that perspective you could get. It's just like, so once you are healthy, you stay with it, becomes the question.
Well, like there's always the argument, the hitters would say, well, the pitchers are taking it too, you know, and so we have to balance things out here, and that's been an excuse that we've heard as well.
Yeah.
The title of the book is Playing Through the Pain, so maybe that's what the author was thinking of when he started the book. Like I say, I think he changed course during the book, but
Yeah.
it did allow Caminiti to play through the pain, and he did have every injury imaginable. If you go through- I didn't make a list of it, but it was pretty significant, the amount of injuries. But Mike, you hit on a good point. And that is that one thing I enjoyed about the book is it showed the contrast between a player that probably would never have been as good a player, but the PEDs made him an all-star and an MVP. And guys like Bonds and Clemens, you know, the guys that would have been in the Hall of Fame anyway, without all that. I don't know if McGuire would have been in the Hall of Fame without, but he might have. I mean, arguably,
yeah.
but definitely Clemens and Bonds would have been, and one or two of the others.
And Sosa was the other guy that I thought became a different player.
Who was the other one?
Sosa.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought Sosa was a good outfielder, but I don't think he's
a Hall
not
of
going to hit
Fame.
600
He
home
did not have
runs.
a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah.
He just took Flintstone vitamins.
Oh, my gosh. You look at Chicago White Sox, Sammy Sosa, I mean, he's, you know, maybe $180, if that. And you look at
He was a
Chicago.
30-30 guy before. White
Yeah, he was a
Sox.
good player. He was a good player, just small though.
But anyway, the book really set that up for me as far as Caminiti. I'm definitely convinced, you know, that he would never have been that type of player, and I didn't really think of him necessarily one way or the other before that.
I think for me, too, one of the things that the book brought out, as well as, I know I refer back to that Pittsburgh cocaine 7, is the lack of Major League Baseball really taking any kind of initiative, you know, to try to curb this early on. And, you know, we look at the players, and if they're hurting, like we're talking about, and they feel like these things will help them. The NFL had the same issue even before this, and guys were dying young because of steroids. But I feel like Major League Baseball is very much at fault here in not dealing with it until way after the fact.
Yeah.
They were making so much money on the Sosa.
Yeah,
McGuire thing.
exactly.
That year. It was fun.
And benefiting really from it.
Well, of course, they needed it because they had the
Because-
94 strike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was 98 that really brought Potter back. So putting the head in the sand is a great reason for you to do it, to let the money.
When we say Major League Baseball, are we basically saying unions? I mean, that's what.
Well, the commissioner.
Yeah, but the commissioners is pretty well tied, but you know, I mean, it's reality.
And at least for a while, I blamed the union because they were so hung up on it's a violation of your rights to test them, that they were picking this player rights thing over like what's best for the game. And so I also hold them accountable as well.
Baseball also had a long tradition of ignoring amphetamines.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Oh,
or
yeah.
nearly everybody was taking them. They were open in the clubhouse, right? And I don't know if this is the case, but I suspect that at least early on, they just looked on steroids as well, just like amphetamines. May not be legal, but that people do it.
It makes the product on the field better than selfish owners are gonna look the other way.
I mean, what baseball couldn't deny was the fact that the summer of '98 was exciting as hell. You know, I mean, you didn't know why at the time, and you feel cheap afterwards.
Yeah.
But during the time, I mean, I remember watching, you know, Sunday afternoon games when the Cardinals would be on, just to see what McGuire was doing. I didn't even like the dude. You know, I mean, I didn't dislike him, but you know, it's like he certainly wasn't one of my favorite players, and nor was Sosa, but it was a fun duel there. It was like, man, I was too young for the Maris Mantle thing, you know, but
I made money off of it.
and plus
We had season tickets for the Reds game. And you know, some of the movies, you see the guys divvying out the tickets at the beginning of the year when they come in, everybody smelling the new tickets. Yeah. I had tickets for the Cardinals series in September, and it came out in July that he was going to break the record on September 12th in Cincinnati. I had the tickets for that day, 5 rows behind the Cardinals dugout. So we had a broker, whenever we couldn't use tickets, we'd give me this broker, and she'd sell them and they'd get the money for it. So she called and says, hey, I got a guy from St. Louis that's willing to pay you $500 a ticket for that date. That's the date he's supposed to break the record. I said, bring her on. So, 2 tickets, I got $1,000, and he broke the record 2 weeks before that.
I think the next book we should do is on gambling addiction to help Mark out.
Guys, this is why we have local chapters, so we can get a lot of different perspectives of what's in it for me.
And people in Oregon don't know what the heck they're talking about.
What's that?
And people in Oregon don't know what you're talking about.
$500 in Oregon is $500 in Ohio.
Yeah, yeah.
I was doing some research, Mike, and it certainly was A-Rod who was one of the 104 anonymous people call positive for steroids, and he admitted to ESPN there was too much pressure on him after Texas, after the big contract signing in Texas, for him to not take steroids. So I think it's just the pressure cooker that baseball was, just the competitive nature of it that kind of causes the whole thing, and the union being the strongest in professional sports just fought it, you know, and I think the union and the commissioner are to blame for what happened, but it's easy to look back now and say, why didn't you know this? Well, we knew something was going on, we just didn't know what.
Yeah. Thanks for the research, Ryan.
Yeah, they know. I think back to the Sports Illustrated article, I think that's the thing that forced management's hand, that they actually had to do something. Now I subscribed to it, and when I read it, you know, I didn't view it as an expose because there had been so much speculation and rumor about what was going on in '98 that the point that Sports Illustrated came out, it was like 3 or 4 years later. So I was like, yeah, we didn't know this. Yeah. So I didn't view it that way, but I think it was important that it came out in such a big public way that management at that point had no way of doing nothing anymore. And that's
It took a decade.
Yeah,
Metro Report's 2007. They knew what's going on and let an entire decade just pass and let it just continue.
But the book actually highlights how much they actually knew in the dugout. People knew that Caminiti was doing stuff. He wasn't even hiding stuff that much. So the fact that, you know, managers or GMs or anybody walking around in the clubhouse is just kind of turning their head to that stuff, that to me, I completely think. You know, we talked about all the finances and all that stuff around, you know, '98 and everything, but to me, there's nothing.
You obviously have no concern for your player.
Right.
Knowing he's probably a drug addict. And
Almighty dollar.
don't want to take him out of lineup though, because you know you can't replace his 35 home runs. But if he dies, he dies. I mean, that's pretty callous. That's just hard.
Rob summarized it in 2 words, the whole discussion.
Almighty dollar.
Yeah. It was.
I kind of have problems with LaRussa being in the Hall of Fame because they won't let steroid users in the Hall of Fame. But he got there on the back of guys who were using steroids.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I never liked LaRussa because I felt like he overworked his pitchers. You know, I felt like he was such I'm going to warm a guy up for every game. I thought he just wore pitchers out. That I didn't think he was a good manager of his pitching staff. Even if they didn't get into the game, they just threw 40 pitches warming up. And I mean, he was like that in Oakland. He was like that in St. Louis. I don't remember as much of his Chicago time, but man, in St. Louis and Oakland, I thought he just wore pitching staffs out. It's just, we've had discussions every year about, some of the guys that haven't gotten into the Hall of Fame because of the steroid speculation on them. And now we've had some guys roll off the ballot that, they're going to have to wait for the Veterans Committee to let them in.
It'll never happen. Never happen.
And I agree with you, Ryan, because it's a group of guys that are already in and who feel like they're in for fair reasons and they don't want it tarnished. But what about guys that have gotten in, who have been shown up in reports? And I'm thinking mostly of like Big Papi, who seem to have been given a pass despite the fact that he was actually in one of those reports, and I don't know whether he ever denied it or not, but he's a good guy.
It was the 2003, it was the same 2003 report that was supposed to be anonymous, and his name leaked, and they were it was shown to kind of be a little bit kind of 03, they didn't know what they were doing as far as how to test properly. So it could have been a failed administrative test or something. So those early tests, they really didn't know what they were doing. So they kind of implicated innocent people in some cases. But Selig actually exonerated Ortiz from steroid use.
Speaking of Ortiz, I think the thing that bothers me about it is a lot of this guys are maybe kept out, or there's suspicion because of how their career turns around or the way they look now, and there's never been real hard and fast evidence on their use. You have a guy like him who looked like his career was done, and all of a sudden something happens that he's hitting home runs like crazy again at the end of his career. And then there was the suspicion earlier, and you have different guys like that late in their careers, all of a sudden something happens that they have this newfound strength or energy, something.
Julie Lotto right now.
Yeah, and it's like, but
That is true.
but we go ahead and, and here he is in the Hall of Fame. Based on that, and I agree. It really bothers me that he's in. I think it's fair. There's a lot of hypocrisy with the Hall of Fame and the steroid issue, because I think there are guys who are in the Hall of Fame who personally I don't think should be, if other guys are being kept out. I just feel like it's that to me is an issue that does bother me. And he's a prime example of it. I think a lot of it's based on his personality. Here's Mr. Fun guy. He's all of that.
He's beloved. I think some things get
Yeah.
swept under.
Oh, I think totally that's the case. You talk about Bonds on one hand who nobody likes,
Right.
and then you have Ortiz who
Boston,
everybody likes.
Boston loves. After the.
And so you've got this, and
Marathon issue.
there's a lot of similarities that that's based on that as much as there is anything.
Well, I always thought too in this steroid thing, I believe he was suspect, was Caminiti's teammate in Houston, Bagwell. Was it Bagwell? He was a steroid, a whisper guy.
I always
right?
thought Bagwell and Biggio before.
Yeah.
I read the.
Yeah, and I always thought, because I thought Bagwell seemed like, that seems right, and then he got it.
Right,
So I thought that shocked me. That he got it.
I mean, I think Bagwell, though, he was a big hitter really from his rookie year on. I mean, because right after, I think they got him from Boston. and really he started hitting home runs right away. So to him, to me at least, it was easier to believe he's just a big guy.
You know, Biggio hit 4 home runs as a 26-year-old and hit 22 as a 40-year-old. Which is a huge number, but it's a lot more than 4.
14 years of back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are the tweener guys. You know, I mean, again, what's similar to Bagwell is, I mean, and Ortiz to a certain extent, he was a very well-liked guy. And
But hearing about the close relationship Biggio and Bagwell had with Caminiti, kind of makes you wonder too.
yeah, but I felt like they were the guys that were telling them, you got to watch who your friends are. And I felt like Biggio and Bagwell were trying to reel him in, and they just weren't successful enough. But I felt like they were always making the effort to try to pull Caminiti out of the darkness into just being a player free of steroids, and they just weren't successful at it. That was how I read the book.
Of course, they gave interviews, so they may have said, "I'll talk to you, but don't,
Yeah.
don't get into that with me." I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to wonder when they talk to the author.
Yeah.
The author shades it a little bit. Although I never really thought that they were that much involved compared to some of the others.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, into the Indians Hall of Fame this weekend goes Manny Ramirez.
Yeah.
I think Manny is a guy that had the qualifications without the steroids.
I mean, the thing that Manny had that like Bonds had is that, you know, whether you can hit the ball further because of steroids, the eye-hand coordination to be a contact hitter and just be a good hitter, those two guys had, and what's why it projects out that they could be a Hall of Famer no matter what, because they could hit the baseball. They weren't home run or strikeout kind of guys.
But I haven't read any of the books on the steroid in general, but what percentage of people did they think of the Major League Play actually took steroids? What percentage of them would have been nobodies if they hadn't taken steroids? That made their whole career. It's like a deal with the devil.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the numbers are all over the books. I couldn't even guess, because I mean, you've got, I don't know, somebody in the book said 85%. It's like, well, that'd be 21 guys per team, so it can't be that. Right. And then others put it into 30 to 40%. You know, I look at guys that had real like sudden leaps in their power numbers, like Brady Anderson. You know, I mean, he was the classic guy that is like, how did Brady Anderson and like Mark, I'm ready for him to be in the Hall of Fame because he won my fantasy league for me one year. I drafted Brady Anderson because he was a good 300 hitter and he was giving me 30 stolen bases a year. So it's like, I got Anderson in my lineup, and then the fact that he get me 50 some home runs was like, wow.
I traded Roger Cedeno for Barry Bonds. That's how I hear.
You're never gonna be in the fantasy Hall of Fame.
That's right.
None of the rest of us are gonna vote for me.
Yeah. And I'll say, I deserve it. I don't deserve to be in. But I got a problem if Mark ever gets in. Well, I mean, back with the book, my going in position was I kind of liked Caminiti before I liked him better before I read the book than after. I liked him because I felt like he was a hard-nosed player. I spent a lot of my ball playing career at third base, so it's like I admired third basemen in general. And so I went in really liking him, and I expected the story to read similar to that A-Rod thing where it's like he was trying to get healthy and he fell into steroids. That was my narrative that I had about him going into this, and not that he was going to continue to make these really poor choices, to continue to not push trying to get his wife closer to him, which could have kept them reeled in, and that he would not just keep making these terrible choices and not listen to the people, like even in the off season. That was the one enlightening thing that came out of the book, was that, my understanding from what I read was that you need to like take some time off steroids to let your body like get a little bit back to normal. And if you don't, then your own body can't create testosterone anymore. And you got to do even more steroids. And so I ended up really disliking or really being disappointed in him. And I ended up not being very sympathetic towards him. That I thought I would feel a little more sympathetic than I ended up.
What I got is I've known a couple of addicts in my life. Sadly, one overdosed and died, son of good friends. And Caminiti's behavior is textbook behavior for an addict. And you wonder all the time. Everybody tries to help. They say they go for help. They go to treatment. And yet somehow they're back. Steve Howe, to me, is a prime example of a guy like that. You always question why. How could he continue to be on that path? An addict, that's their behavior, and it's totally irrational. The addicts I've known, their parents, friends have tried to reason. You can't reason. It's like there's something.
Well, it starts with them. They have to want help to be able to get help.
And they do want help. But there's something else there, it seems like, that doesn't allow them to get out of it or to.
I think they're, I don't know how to say this, right? I think they're a little weak going in, that they would even try to put stuff in your body like that. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, whatever reason they go into, his reasons seem to be.
I've been on like prednisone, which is a steroid, for medical reasons, and I couldn't wait to get off of it because I knew it wasn't, and it was prescribed by a doctor, right? But I couldn't wait to get off of it because you just know it's not the right thing to be putting in your body. And these guys even try this stuff. I don't know what the number is. If it's 30%. I hope it's not 85%. But I mean, it's just, there's a little bit of weakness, mentally to even try this stuff.
We had Tom Browning as a speaker one time. And one of the questions was about steroids. He said that, it wasn't really prevalent when he was playing. He was kind of before that era. But he said he loved playing so much that if he thought it could have got him a couple more years, he would have done it.
What you're kind of raising the question, which I don't have an answer because I just don't know it. The interesting thing about him for me was that he used drugs a whole lot before the steroids.
Right.
And I got the sense with most of the steroid users that were prominent, that was not the case. That they were just kind of a rational decision on their part, like what you were describing, like, I'm going to be better, and this is the way to do it. But Caminiti was in a different category. And again, I don't know if he's unusual or I just don't know enough about some of these other players.
I think it's a good point because he was definitely cavalier about drug use in general.
Yeah,
so he probably had zero reservations about any threats that people might have been talking about for the ramifications that steroids might have.
Whole excuse of everyone's doing it. Yeah. Everyone's not doing it. It's people you're associating with it.
Right.
And to Rick's point, that with the talking with the author, this Dave Moretti guy, who probably should have been notified a little more that okay, he's kind of got a pass, but he talked with the author, so he probably
right.
But, he came across as trying to help, and he was a stealer. I don't understand that.
Although the author did say that Moretti was relieved that he wasn't thrown under the bus as much in the Sports Illustrated article. So there was at least some guilt there, but you're right. Overall, he got a kind of a pass.
Because I think that is the standard explanation. I have to use it because the guy, my opponent's using it and I can't keep up. And so
I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah. And so has there ever been anyone who said, I can't, this is gonna kill me, I'm gonna retire, or has it been just the money and fame of Major League Baseball been too much for him to say no to something like that? Have we ever heard of anyone who said, I retired rather than do that?
I don't know. You know, I think it would put you in a tough spot if you said that, because then the follow-up question is, like who? You know, like, so who on your team are you, you know, not gonna keep your spot because they're doing it and I'm not?
John, if there is, that's a guy that a book I would, I would read it.
Yeah.
Because he's a real hero.
Hey,
Think about other guys who've done it, but just didn't say.
Right, exactly.
Joshua, out there in Oregon, do you have any comments? You've been quiet.
He can't turn on his phone or his camera. He's
All right,
he's muted. So
I see. All right, Joshua, we just tried to engage.
it's okay.
Like, one other thing I would say too, when we talk about, you know,
He Blake, Josh just sent a message in chat. He said, I had no comments. This is a great conversation.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure he had a chance. Thanks. Glad you're here, Josh.
and I don't know if it's this way with steroids, but if you talk to certain addicts with drugs, depending on the drug, your body becomes dependent on that drug. And so at times going off of it is worse than being on it, because the condition the body goes through. And I think being able to have the courage to get through that rough patch, and you talk about having dependencies, people you can to help you. I think that's what's important. And, you know, obviously, but still, they have to want to make an effort to go.
I feel like he had, I mean, somebody said earlier, you know, he's had a number of chances because he went to rehab centers where he probably got through that transition of being clean. Now you just have to stay that way. And he would always go back.
He who, Blake?
Caminiti.
Oh,
He would get sent to, he would go to these rehab centers or clinics, and he'd get his body clean of it, but then he'd come back out and then he'd go into relapse again.
Well, that's the hard part when you're going through it to get off this stuff. People talk about how it's just awful. You would think they wouldn't want to have to do that.
I know, see, that's the sad thing. You heard about it, they have one relapse, just one. You know, then it goes into a full blown, they could, you know, fall back into the offense. And that just, then the hopelessness comes into play, and it's a sad cycle.
He violated the cardinal sin, and that is made friends with people in rehab.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is that where he met that?
He's the kind of guy that seemed like a friendly guy that everybody obviously attracted to, and he was attracted to those people too because of his openness and his friendship. He makes friends with people and comes out of rehab and eventually runs into them again or has a relationship with that one lady. They never really said what her specific problem was, but obviously she was not a good influence on Kim and him. And that
I think one crutch that the author had too was that, and maybe people said this, but everybody became best friends with both. You know, you can only have 2 or 3 best friends. You don't have time to be best friends with everybody. Suddenly, everybody was his best friend after meeting him twice. You know, that kind of was a little hard to swallow.
You know, we're talking about these guys whose steroids, drugs have seemed to have helped their careers. But then I also think of different ones who drugs seem to have destroyed unbelievably promising careers, like Doc Goodman, Daryl Strawberry. I mean, these are 2 guys who you think, man, nobody, look at Doc Goodman when he broke in. I mean, unbelievable. It
was must watch.
Amazing. And in very short time, it was pretty much over. He still hung on, but not. And Daryl Strawberry, every time I'd watch him, I think this guy, I mean, that swing, you know, and yet he was in and out of treatments and these are guys where you see how the other side, where drugs basically destroyed.
Doc Ellis.
Steve Howe.
Steve Howe.
Steve Howe, yeah.
But by the way, just about Doc, when you have a nice long road trip, you can get the Doc Gooden story on books on CD from the library. It's a really good read. I did not want to physically read the book, but man, it made for a great road trip book to listen to.
Heat, I think it's called, right?
What's that?
It's Heat. It's called Heat, I think.
No, this one was just called Doc.
Oh,
Yeah, it was just called Doc. I think it is an autobiography with somebody, but yeah.
His foundation, remorseful about the whole drug usage and.
Are you talking about Gooden still?
Doc
Doc Ellis,
The
yeah.
other Doc.
The other talk about the
But is he remorseful about flunking 5 Reds in a row?
If you read the book Cobra, like Dave Parker.
He's remorseful that he didn't make it 6.
Kept most of the black guys in line on Pittsburgh. I was sitting in the bowling alley parking.
No, his documentary, we talked about before, Lakers,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Prime Video.
Yeah, and actually the library's got a copy for people who aren't doing that. The library has a copy of the documentary as
It's
well.
really good. Talking about the Pirates in the early
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
what documentary is that? Like,
The documentary No, the Doc Ellis documentary.
Yeah.
Off the subject, but Mark mentioned the book, Cobra. Does anybody know why the library system took it out?
I'll tell you what,
Or you know?
no, so I-
Seriously.
I have a friend who works at the library. So because Dave suggested it,
Actually, Mike mentioned it
yeah.
a couple meetings ago, remember? You
And
mentioned
so I
it.
need to get an answer to that. So I go in and I look for my friend Mark and I said, is Mark here today? And she goes, no, but I'm sure I can help you. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure you're going to be able to help me. Because at some point she goes, I said, I just can't believe him. He played a lot of his career in Cincinnati. This is a big deal. And she said, I never heard of him. You know, it's like, that's why I wanted to talk to Mark. Yeah. But anyway, she blamed it on the fact that it was, Nebraska publishing is not a big book distributor, but it's like, I said, okay, well, Cincinnati, it says has like 8 copies in their system. Westerville has a copy because they're technically a separate library system. So it shows up if you do search Ohio. Ohio.
Lincoln used to show up Columbus Metropolitan Library.
Yeah,
There was more than one copy there.
yeah.
It's gone. for
Well,
some
she
reason.
didn't, and
Yeah.
she wasn't.
I wish Sam Patton was here because he could give us an answer.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not.
Yeah.
He's
There's
retired.
none in Springfield either.
So I felt very unsatisfied that like she didn't try very hard.
Well, there was some sex in it, and drugs in it.
Well,
It didn't,
Yeah, but what book doesn't have that?
Well, Mike, I suggested we leave it again. We can bring it back up on the list.
All right, before we go to the next book, any other wrap up comments about this book before we move on?
I think we bashed him a lot, but I think we go back to some of the other folks were saying about his managers and his family. He was an alcoholic by the time he was 14. And, his family didn't do anything to try and straighten him out. His coaches in high school and stuff, they just sort of ignored him. It obviously had to be appearing on the field a little bit, or at least practice at home. And I just felt he was let down a lot. He made bad choices, but he didn't get, a lot of people should have been helping him, just weren't there. And I felt sorry for him for that.
Well, like a lot of his, I'm willing to give him another chance. I wish he was still around, he's that kind of a guy that somebody, you know, could have saved it. I did want to say, after some of us have kind of, maybe me too, had a few knocks about the book, that I thought the author is a good writer, very good writer. I thought his descriptions, even in minutiae, really wasn't exciting. He has an exciting writing style. And I also was very impressed with how many people he interviewed and how many people talked to him, because there's an art to getting someone to talk to. It's hard to cold call somebody. Maybe he had somebody to help him set these up, but it's hard to pick up that phone and, you know, try to call somebody. And in this case, it was a person who did not have a good end. So it may have been even more difficult to get people to open up and talk about a friend. Many people did. If you looked at the list at the end of the book, there's a ton of people that you talked to. So that's all I wanted to.
But by the way, for you, the three new guys, Rick is the author of several books. The one on Jimmy Collins, Eddie Collins.
He's working on Jimmy.
One on the one with the big ears. The one with the big ears. The Chalmers race, which was the batting race of 1910. The book on George Sisler called The Sizzler, and you're currently working on Billy Evans.
Right. Several chapters now.
Yeah.
Several chapters.
So.
Now, he wasn't on your family.
So I just want you guys to know, this is coming from an author.
He umpired Mark's fantasy.
He's very generous.
Before we read this, I wanted to pick up on Rick's point about authors favoring people who talk to them. Because I think that helps explain some of the patterns in this book. And it's probably something we should keep in mind on other books as well. You know, by coincidence, people are talking about that with Michael Lewis this week. But that was a very worthwhile point. I never thought very much about that.
Well, I don't think it's a conscious thing necessarily.
Oh, no,
It's
no.
almost unconscious that if somebody's talked to you and
Yeah.
been open about things, it's kind of then hard to turn around and, you know.
Use it against them.
In the side, you know, with, well, he was a drug user too, however. But while he was talking to me, he didn't mention it, you know, so there is a tendency to shade it a little bit unconsciously.
Well, it's called speaking as a writer, it's called deep background. It's something Bob Woodward really used in all the President's Men to bring Nixon down, and reporters have used it to a great degree. All giving the facts. I won't quote you. I won't reveal my source. The thing is, when you're a writer, you don't want to give your sources up, because that may put you into trouble. You know, I mean, so we won't know how he talked to those people he did. You know, it's not for us to know.
Good point, Brian.
Anything else on this before we move on to the next quarter's book? Okay, fellas, that was a enjoyable conversation. First of all, thanks you guys really responded to the comment about, hey, if you have a book, send it to me in advance. We could have like some basic stats on those books. I have 11 to pick from. Let me first read this. 2 of them are left from last, because traditionally, and I'm repeating myself for the new guys, is that we always take whoever finished second and third and just kind of put them on the list for the next consideration, which was Let's Play 2 about Ernie Banks, and the Warren Spahn book written by Lou Friedman. Even though the library doesn't have any.
Is that his biography?
Yeah, it's not in the library. Ron Rappaport, and the library's got 10 copies. They're both available in paperback. The other books, I'm gonna list them pretty quickly, and then before we vote, but Dave submitted Cobra. Again, if you go through Ohio Link, you can get it. There's a lot of copies available, used copies. I don't think it's been put out in paperback yet, but and the mystery remains why Columbus doesn't have copies. I tend to agree with Steve. I think there's got to be a content issue somewhere, because I remember seeing books on order showing up in the library system, but they weren't on the shelf yet. So Baseball Cop, Eddie Dominguez, you want to make a comment or two about that book?
Sure. This is kind of a follow-up to what Caminiti is. It's Major League Baseball's response to the steroid issue. The writer was a Boston cop who was hired as a security man for Boston clubhouse. And then Major League Baseball was supposed to put this task force together to look into the drug and investigate the drugs. They put him on that. And if you had any liking of Ortiz before, you won't after this book. He had all kinds of friends that he brought into the locker room involved with drugs and gambling. And he got him barred from the Boston clubhouse. But then at the Major League All-Star game, Ortiz was in the home run derby. This guy is doing some security. Here comes Ortiz with all the guys that he had banned from the Boston clubhouse. They all ran Dominican barbershops. Had gambling going on in the back room or something. And he called Major League Baseball and he said, we need to get these guys off the field with these home run derby guys. So they went to Ortiz and told him he had to leave. And he said, well, if they have to leave, then I'm not participating. So Major League Manfred called back to let him go. Just let him stay. So that was kind of, if you were a star, you were good. Talks about the security that the commissioner had to have because he thought A-Rod's gang was going to shoot him in the parking lot. It's a pretty good book. I didn't think I was going to like it at the beginning, but I got into it. Explained a lot about the hypocrisy of the commissioner's office when it came to the whole steroid issue. You can borrow it if you like.
I'm just kidding.
Steve, why don't you tell him, because you popped a couple of books in here, right?
I don't know what, right, here's what else we got. He's back. Book of Joe Madden. Public Columbus Library, 29. Here's the man. I was just gonna.
Sorry, guys, I've had some medical issues lately that it's like when I gotta go, and I have a time limit. And if I'm not there, so.
We're on the Madden book.
Okay. Yeah, so Book of Joe, it is available in paperback. There's 29 copies in the library system. Church of Baseball was about the making of the movie Bull Durham and the philosophy behind that. Also 30 copies in the library. It's available in paperback. The Grandest Stage, which is one of the History of the World Series books by Tyler Kepner. I mean, I've read it. It's a good summary, but it's it's a nice collection of different games. The Saga of Sudden Sam, which is the book on Sam McDowell. It's not out in paperback yet, but the library's got 14 copies. There would be a decent chance that he would probably respond to join us.
He may even bring Sam McDowell himself.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's he's a survivor of this kind of situation where alcohol was his deal, and he finished his life out really, he's still living, I think, but
Well,
Yes.
he's, yeah. And he's active in helping others now to keep them from being in the situation he was in. Whisper of the Gods by Peter Golenbach. You want to talk a little bit about that book?
Basically, very similar to Glory of Their Times. I've listened to podcasts on all these, but anyway, it's players from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I did not list out all the players, but most this group would know of.
Yeah.
And it's basically oral histories.
Which, for people who've been here for a while, this was our 48th book. We've been going on for 14 years or so. But Glory of Our Times was the very first book, to kick this off.
I haven't read it. I just listened to the podcast.
Okay.
The author. The podcast was excellent. And I'm going to read it. Regardless if we do or not, but yeah, it's sounds great.
The next one is The Greatest Game Pitched, which is that shutout game between Spawn and Marshall. You probably know a lot about that game, and then the last one, Cooperstown Confidential by Zev Shefetz. It's also available in paperback. There's only 2 copies in the library. The Greatest Game Ever.
Actually, I just looked at Search Ohio, there are 14 copies.
Yeah. So Search Ohio is always a secondary thing. You still, I think, get it through the library system. It just is liable to take longer to get in.
Same with The Greatest Game Ever. I think
Yeah.
there was only 1 or 2 copies of that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I didn't do Search Ohio.
Yeah. So a lot of books. And
Go for 6 the first time around.
well,
Cooperstown Confidential was
Six
that
to
about?
three, one.
What's it about?
Yeah, Dave, you.
Heroes, Rogues, and the Inside Story of Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I haven't read it. It was on my shelf. Thought that looks interesting. I don't know, other than the blurb, I can't tell you much about
The
it.
all things interworking.
Yeah,
The author,
yeah.
Rick.
Zev Shefetz, Chafetz.
Can't go wrong with a guy named Zeb.
so I think that one of our risks always are, and we've had a couple books that weren't awesome because we typically pick books that we haven't read and we want to read. So I think a book like that, no one's read it yet, but may or may not work out. But I think that's what makes book clubs fun. So anyway,
As you and I discussed when we first talked about it, was the Vince Scully.
Yeah. yeah. And then we had the author for that one, and the author actually is a member of SABR, and he came, or he was on via thing, and he did a terrific job talking about the book, and he was a great Kurt Smith. He was a great guest, and so
The new guy, he's a well-known author, and he's a former presidential speechwriter. But the Vin Scully book was horrendous.
He was great in the session.
Yeah, he was one of the best.
He gave my copy.
And he's great to see in person. I've seen him at SABR.
Yeah, he's a nice fellow.
He wrote a book on the presidents in baseball, which is really interesting. He starts with Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Back when they played town ball, but he goes through pretty much every president and their wives. Some of their wives were big baseball fans. It's a really good book, well written, and he does it in a very nonpartisan way. But anyway,
What was it like to have Tom Gilbert there last time?
Again, he did a terrific job. It was a book that I thought was dry at times, and I think collectively a number of us thought it was a fairly dry book, but his presentation and how he could like bring up a lot of questions. I thought he turned out to be really good to have. So I thought it was good.
I was thinking of nominating a book, the Babe Ruth book by Jane Levy.
Yeah.
Have
I mean, we were unsuccessful at trying to get her to come to our meeting, I think, or to even call in. I think, was it the Mantle book, the last hero? Oh, no, Koufax. We did the Koufax book, and I was really hoping she'd, did we? Okay.
We did both the Mantle.
She's
and
not.
Koufax book.
She's not.
And the Babe Ruth's a terrific book, but she'll never come.
Yeah. Which is okay. I mean,
Now, Ron Rappaport might come. He's the guy that did the Ernie Banks book. I mean, might call in. He lives in LA, I think.
Yeah.
He's a real nice guy, and very down to earth.
So just know there's a couple books on here, the Spawn book, the Greatest Game Pitched, the Cobra book, Cooperstown Confidential. Just know that it'll be a little bit harder to grab it through the library system because you'll have to go through Ohio Link, but it's not an insurmountable task. Or you can simply buy the book and, probably for $10 or $15, you can probably get a used one that includes shipping. So
You didn't put it on there, but some of the books I researched, there was like $2 difference between the hardback and the paperback.
Sometimes.
I mean, I'm just pointing that out. So before guys get hung up about, I don't want to buy a hardback book or whatever, take a look at the price, because those books that I bubbled up there was exactly $2 difference between hardback and paperback.
Well, and also check Amazon, because I got the Babe Ruth book, I think, for $1.99.
Yeah.
It's an ebook, if you don't mind an ebook, but $1.99 is not a
And
bad.
Kindle too. I researched the books.
Bookfinder.com.
So.
Right.
what was that, Ryan?
Bookfinder.com
Yeah.
is a great source for that. I'd love to nominate the Ruth book. Put that on our list to vote on.
The Jane Levy one.
Yeah, the Jane Levy Ruth book.
There's a lot of, you almost have to have a Babe Ruth day or something. Because
Yeah.
There were so many good books out on Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
We did the Babe Ruth book, or one of the Babe Ruths. We all picked.
Right.
It was book number 24, so it was probably been about 4 or 5 years since we did
Pre-COVID.
it.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna try. I'll send this list out.
Yeah.
We're up to, this was the 48th book. Just the starting with Glory of Their Times, which, me getting this thing started, I was going to pick a book that, Rick and I talked, let's pick one that we think a lot of people probably already have on their shelf to get this thing started. And then the second book was the last one where I picked, and then we went into voting. It was a Roberto Clemente book. And I wanted to say, let's make this pirate books only, but I wasn't getting a lot of support. I was getting a little bit of support from.
We
really haven't done that many.
I've been up for vote many times, so.
Yeah. So we did Three Finger Brown, Satchel Paige, The Street, Fenway, Breaking the Slump, 59 and 84, Bullpen Gospels, which was one of the wildest ones we had. If I Never Get Back is probably the only fiction that we did. Moberg. I'll send the list out. It's a long list. All right. When John comes back in, we're going to go through the voting. Anything else? I think what we'll do is we'll vote for.
The 48 books.
Yes. Yeah. I'll send that out.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
You know, we tried to then, but I gave my copy to our first year, #2 radio guy with the Dragons. He's just out of college. He read it. He said it gave him a whole new perspective on how to use new analytics, you know, miles per hour and all these things.
Yeah.
Because Vince said that was for idiots to use all these analytics. He
By
said
the,
it's
by the way, I'm the only one on here. Josh has left us, so
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
One more question. Lee Lincoln, a good buddy, they have a double day, is that how this all got started?
I don't think so.
Lincoln actually played town ball or whatever, they call it back in. We don't have Tulu and Kim back here to talk about that.
Yeah, he played vintage baseball before. it was
Yeah,
called
he
vintage
played
baseball.
vintage baseball before these guys ever. But now it goes back that far.
Mike, did we ever do where nobody knows your name?
Yes, we did that. Book number 27. That's why I bring my list with me. Yeah.
And that counts for Red's book
What
too.
about Stars and Strikes? It's the
We did not do Stars and Stripes. We did Big Hair and Plastic Wrap
same
with
author.
the same author. One of my favorite author guests we ever had. I mean,
Yeah, that was a good one.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's
And-
about the whole 70s.
And my correspondence with him beforehand was all about, we were trading our favorite albums of the 70s because I knew he wrote for Rolling Stone. And so we got to talking about 70s rock
Is that
and
Epstein? Is that-
yeah, Stan Epstein.
Dan.
Dan Epstein.
Should have hit him on the drug talks.
Yeah. So anyways, he was really enjoyable and probably the most controversial. I felt like, or the most shocking at times, was Dirk Hayquist. Was that Hayhurst? Hayhurst. You know, who somebody asked the question about, what about Greg Maddux? He says, Greg effing Maddux. He said he was not helpful at all. The question was about, like, you know, who are the good mentors in his career when he was in San Diego, and Maddux happened to be there.
So he didn't say nothing.
Yeah.
He said it.
Yeah.
He didn't listen
And-
to it. He didn't listen to his mother. He had nothing nice to say.
Yeah, that's right. He did. You know, but the other big takeaway that he really harped on, which, you know, in this last collective agreement, you know, got some traction with, was Hayhurst really felt strongly about that baseball was mismanaging their assets in the minor league by not giving them good nutrition. And, you know, in his mind, he was just like, that was his biggest issue, was for $1 million, you could sign this, or you could solve this problem if you just spread $1 million worth of food money out to getting tables of food, good food, instead of making these players live on their, you know, the low minors living on their, yeah, where they're eating McDonald's and just stuff that's junk going into their bodies. But, you know, between that and the leftover hot dogs, so anyways, and it turned out that bubbled up as one of the issues that, you know, that got some attention in that last agreement. That I don't know whether he can take credit, but it certainly was one that he, yeah.
I thought, like, he was the one guy I thought, when Ernie in point of question, I thought he was gonna hang up on us. I thought for sure.
I don't remember what question Ernie asked.
He made a comment, he said that you had the worst record. Your record was the worst in the league that year. Only Ernie can,
I miss Ernie.
yeah.
All right, guys, we ready to vote? So here's what we're gonna do. The first round, we're gonna pick 4 votes, 4 books, just because there's so many of them. And then we're gonna take the top 3 finishers out of all the votes, and then vote a second time where you only get 1 vote for the final 3. All right, I'm gonna list the books because there was a lot of them to remember. Ernie Banks, Warren Spahn, Parker, Baseball Cop, Book of Joe, Joe Madden, Church of Baseball, Grandest Stage on the World Series, Sudden Sam, Whisper of the Gods, Greatest Game Ever Pitched, Cooperstown Confidential, and Babe Ruth. So that's 12 books to pick from. Each person gets 4 votes. It's show of hands, it's the honor system.
There's no money involved.
So, Art, you're in charge.
Oh, well, man, that's like, oh,
I just put the fox in charge of the hen house.
a little bit of credibility we had left.
Okay, so you're gonna get 4 votes. We're gonna go through these. All right, let's play 2. 1, 2, 3.
4.
Ryan, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What did I say? Were we voting?
4 times.
No, who was that book though?
Oh, they're
Bernie
gonna be-
Mac.
Okay. All right. Warren Spahn. 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
4, 5.
Put me down, because I didn't have my hand up. So it makes it 6.
Okay. Dave Parker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Baseball Cop. 1, 2, 3, 4. Book of Joe, Joe Madden. And the guy that nominated it's not here, by the way. So I
Sorry, Blake.
technically could put down 2, but
He's a great interview. I saw him on MLB Network.
This is why we stopped you from picking books, Blake.
Ryan, did you?
He wasn't a pirate.
No, I was apologizing. I was apologizing. You did my votes.
Okay, so we're gonna vote again on that book because we got lost. 1. Okay, that's a 1. I don't like its chances. All right.
Hey, Chad.
Church of Baseball. 1, 2, 3,
I'll go ahead.
4. I'd be 5. The World Series book, The Grandest Stage. 1, 2, 3.
Man, he's looking better.
Sudden Sam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whisper of the Gods. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, what's that one about again?
It's the
Oral history.
Oral history.
Oh. Let's vote again.
Oh yeah, what I liked about that was that I liked the era because it's kind of the 40s through the 60s. All right, we need to vote again.
Yeah.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wow.
Jeez. You only gotta have a recount, man. It changes the election.
Just need 2 more votes.
Can you find me 4 votes?
Mark, do your magic.
Come on, Bart.
Okay. All right.
I don't know what's so funny. Can somebody remind me, please?
It's because we had to vote a second time and we got 8 votes out of it after the clarification. So
Brought in suitcases of extra votes.
so now there's a lot of political jokes of find me more votes for the Madden book.
Okay.
All right. Greatest game ever pitched. 1, 2. It's a giant.
I think I voted for it.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. Cooperstown Confidential. 1, 2, 3, 4. Babe Ruth.
I'm the only one probably.
You are it. Mainly Ryan, because we did a Babe Ruth.
That's okay.
All right, so here's the 3 finalists. Whisper of the Gods with 8, Sudden Sam with 7, and Ernie Banks with 8.
Wasn't there another 8?
Whisper of the Gods. No, I have 8 for Banks, 6 for Warren Spahn, 6 for Cobra, 4 for Baseball Cop, 1 guy for Book of Joe, 5 for Church of God or Church of Baseball, Grandest Stage. Yeah. There is a book called, you probably know it, God as a Path, Baseball as a Path to God, or something to that.
Yes.
He was a pastor of a church. by the way.
Baseball is the road to God. I think this.
That's the road to God?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So
It's not on the list.
so I'll put that on the next one. Yeah. If I could talk one other guy, so it'll beat Matt. All right. The World Series book got 3. Sudden Sam got 7. Whisper of the Gods got 8. 2 for the Greatest Game Pitched. 4 for Confidential, Cooperstown Confidential, and 1 for Babe Ruth. So the top 3, which are Banks, McDowell, and Whispers.
You get 1 vote.
And just to Whispers and Sudden Sam are not out in paperback yet, but there's 14 and 19 copies respectively in the library, so there's plenty of access. The Banks is available in paperback, and there's 10 copies in the library as well. So I think they're all pretty accessible.
Rick, I think I have one more vote. Would you give it to Babe Ruth? I hate the fact that Ruth and Matt shot.
Wait a minute, we got somebody to audit this election.
I'll take it to the committee and I'll bubble it back. All right.
We did 1 vote this time?
Okay, so just 1 vote. Banks, McDowell, and Whisper of the Gods.
All right, let's go.
All right. Ernie Banks. 1, 2. Brian, was your hand up or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
3.
It won't do any good, but it's up.
All right. You're participating in the democratic process. Sudden Sam. 1, 2, 3. Were you up or no, Rick?
No.
Okay. 3.
I think I know who the winner is.
So I think that late
You have to do it anyway. Let's see the hands.
Whisper of the Gods, Peter Golenbach. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
We could probably get him, perhaps.
So the only interesting thing is we've got 13 people, including at home, and somehow we have 14 votes. So somebody did vote twice.
We have 13 here. I counted
Yeah,
earlier. We have
14 with him.
14 on the phone.
Okay,
Yeah.
like I said,
Good audit.
it's-
Good audit, Rob.
I just was testing the audit procedures. All right. Whisper of the Gods is the author Peter Golenbach. There's 19 copies in the library. Whispers. And I'll send out an email this week with the information. I mean, I heard from Mike Curtin and Kim Knack and several guys that said they weren't going to be able to be here today, so they'll want to know the book right
Did they
away.
vote?
They did not vote. You got to be here to vote. Just
Now, Blake, we're getting very close to the point where we spend more time on the next book than on the current book.
well,
Right, to streamline it.
that's why we tried streamlining it, because I felt like that was the case last time. So, all right, guys, that's it. I would make an offer to the three new guys if you want to spend some time with anybody who wants to stay, just to talk more about the website and how to get your most value out of your SABR membership since you're new. I'd be happy to stick around. Just some, I don't know whether you've got some research projects you're dying to start, but it could certainly help you do that.
Try to do that next month. I just got
yeah.
a text that I need to-
No, yep, we can do it after church sometime.
Okay.
Wait,
Yeah.
Brian Resnick's not here. Is Facebook up and running? or what's
It is up and running. I don't know how current he's kept it. You know, no one's ever asked me about whether it's current or not, so I suspect we're getting, we haven't gotten a lot of hits. Yeah.
Anybody, I'm not a Facebook.
I post all the time.
Okay, so we got one active. Jeff, thanks for coming.
I look forward to getting to know everybody. Sorry, I need to.
It's all right.
I had a good time, thank you.
See you.
Our next gathering is probably, I don't know whether we'll do a Ohio State baseball next or whether that'll be before the World Series get together, but one of those two. I think that sometimes they're in September, which would tell me they're probably beforehand. Do you remember when the Scarlet and Gray games are at Ohio
They
State?
haven't been announced, so I don't even know. We got a new coach, new program, we cleaning house, don't even know if he's having. I mean,
Yeah.
I keep looking, but I don't know yet for sure.
It's been a tradition, you know.
Got 30 new players coming in.
Yeah.
So is it interschool? Is that what-
Literally.
They are. They usually play one game against somebody. I think they're allowed to play.
They played, last year they played Dayton and Pittsburgh. Both of them. It's sometime in October, but I mean, this new coach is changing everything. I've not seen a schedule yet if they're doing it or anything.
They play full, like, they play 7, 9, do they? Some standard.
No.
I think we're invited back.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. 30 new players coming.
So kind of like Deion Sanders, only different?
A lot like it. Yeah.
I don't think they can lose those scholarships, so just because he decides, I think the kids get to keep them.
Well, a lot of them graduated. Well, they're on partial anyway. You only got 11.7 for 35 players. Do the math.
What I'm saying is the new guys probably.
Oh,
don't get it.
I don't know.
The old guys
I
get
don't
to
know.
keep them.
He's got a transfer coming in from LSU who was the backup to the #1 overall selection in the draft.
Somehow, if baseball could have any impact on college, they would figure out a way to help fund more scholarships. Because I mean, that's why football's kicking baseball's ass. One of the reasons why they're kicking their ass is because all the players, the backup plan and going to play college football is it's easy to get a full-time ride, whereas in baseball, almost none of the guys on the team have more than a 0.5 scholarship.
Baseball has a golden opportunity right now, but I don't think they're going to take advantage
Yeah.
with the
Contraction.
in the minor leagues and how heavy the major leagues are emphasizing college players and everything. I mean, college baseball, if they wanted to,
It could be
I mean,
really
it could
big.
become a big
There has to
time.
be as many boy scholarships.
It's a minor league talent. though.
Yes,
It's fun
it
to
is.
watch.
Well, there's 150 football
You're seeing a
scholarships.
lot of kids from college, I mean.
You can't even have the boys and girls.
But what's gonna happen, I mean, is football gonna run, well, obviously football runs the show, but like, is the Big Ten for baseball going to be USC, UCLA, you know?
They're in for all
I
sports,
think
yeah.
it is right now, but that's being discussed, even about basketball. It's,
Stanford.
there's a lot of discussion.
Travel's
What they're
gonna
gonna
be a
do in
Well,
basketball.
that's just it,
Yeah.
because they're playing pregame series,
Right.
right? So the Buckeyes could go on a West Coast skid, and they could be there for a week.
But they already are the whole month of February and March. Or
Oh, they
most
go down
most
south.
of March, because their first 21 games this year were either out west or down south.
Well, I read a thing that UCLA baseball players will go to class 3 times.
Yeah, it makes no sense, you know, if you're a tennis player, and you're out on a road trip and things like that,
Oh,
it's
yes.
I mean, you'll remember those.
ridiculous.
Hey, go to Seattle to play Washington.
It's always worth seeing this story. Don't go all the way up to Seattle and then you're down to Maryland. I mean, it's just,
My granddaughter takes most of her classes online. Plays softball. When they're on the road, they're taking classes all day online.
Well, COVID proved to do it.
Yeah,
So,
COVID really changed it.
Well, that's pretty much what college is becoming, which I don't understand why they're building all the new buildings or building like down on campus, or maybe because there aren't that many classes even taught in the classroom anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk about money, that's gonna get expensive, you know, for those schools for their travel budgets, you know, to go.
there'll be a proposal someday, I think, to split football on.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly's already, the UCLA.
It seems like it makes sense.
Has already said that
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense not to do that.
I agree.
It's gonna catch on.
Or I think you're not gonna have the Big Ten or the SEC anymore, you're gonna have different game conferences, super conferences, and the Big Ten will become your standard, all other sports other than football.
Be NFL AAA.
So long as they can work it out with the television.
But that's just, I think the NFL would be smart to say, hey, we'll fund this.
It's all about the TV contract.
Because now with
Notre
NIL,
Dame's got
you don't have,
somebody,
you're gonna lose your, you know, amateur status.
It's all about what Rob said earlier about the discussion about steroids and the owners and everything. It's all about the money.
Yeah,
That's all it
absolutely.
is. That's all it is. It all boils down to that.
Yeah, but college still has that college charm, like the bands and the traditions and all that. If
Sort
you're
of.
no longer Ohio State, you're now the Columbus Crusaders or whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna.
Well, let's,
And that's the risk, is that we're gonna be losing that. Maybe we're just,
yeah, but college football, let's face it, it's a minor league for the NFL.
It absolutely is.
It's nothing but minor league football.
But it can still cash in on, we got a man.
They do.
Louis Buckeye.
It's 100,000.
and people are
that like a
personally,
minor
they
league
go
football,
there,
and
they're
paying more than
personally
they would pay if
invested
they
in
went
the
to the Browns or
university.
Big Brain, by the way.
Would
Just like
Cardell
Notre
Jones
Dame.
Think
say-
about it.
People go to South.
Would Cardell
Bend,
Jones say,
City,
do I have to go to class?
Steve, thinking about the money, I don't know if you heard.
Brian, we're diverging here.
Yes, I hear it.
Presidents wanted to send them out.
I hear it.
Athletic directors said, no way, we will cut down.
Yeah. Yeah, is that right?
Money, oh, yeah, because they wouldn't be as attractive.
Right.
TV
Yeah,
contracts.
that's
they-
really-
Yeah,
Even though academically, they were.
academically, all the presidents wanted a part of the Big Ten.
Well, at Stanford.
The athletic director said, no way.
Because to show you how much power the presidents have
That's
now.
exactly right.
Stanford won an ACC.
Are they really?
All right, guys, we'll officially call ourselves adjourned. All right, we're off the road. Ryan, thanks for joining us. And
Thank
again,
you,
thanks
Boyd.
for supplementing
See everybody.
some good information while you were there.
Thanks.
Thanks.
But you're right, Rob, there's so much money in college football. These TV deals that are getting now too.
Yeah.
Well, the ticket prices are